Hello and welcome to my presentation on participation and decision-making and learning in organizations. So today I will be exploring what is the importance of participative management and strategies for encouraging employee engagement in organizational decision-making and learning. Whilst many organizations tend to have what we call the top-down approach in terms of making decisions, more and more organizations are encouraging what is now called a non-hierarchical approach, even though hierarchies still remain, but the decisions of operations, how to approach problems and such have now spread out better to the rest of the organization. There's now a recognition that employees are not just recipients of instructions and data and knowledge, but they can also be part of the knowledge sharing system. Now I'm going to look at three out of quite a number of scholars who have been instrumental in these changes. So we'll start with Herbert Alexander Simon, usually just known as Herbert A. Simon. He is the pioneer of artificial intelligence and trailblazer in decision-making. He actually won an award. He's a Nobel laureate who won an award for his bounded rationality theory, which states that instead of striving to make the best choices, most people just settle on merely satisfactory choices. So there's a lot of decisions that people make in their lives for their work. And whilst people who study, like himself, he's an economist and a psychologist, whilst they were doing some research, they realized that people tend to just make the decision they choose what is satisfactory, not necessarily what's like the best of them, also given the circumstances and where they are. So he started from the psychology of learning, right? Pedagogy, if you may, with its less complicated rules of choice. And he says you find that it's more moderate demands on the memory. So people don't want to be calculating or really looking at, this is if I do this, this is the best for me. Like, I'll give an example. Let's talk healthy eating, for example, healthy eating, exercise, going to school, reading. When people make choices, they're not necessarily saying, okay, if I do this, then I'm going to be successful, I'll be rich. They just look at a choice and say, hey, at least this suits me. It's fine. So he challenged that notion that people always think of what's in the best of their interest. No, they usually think in terms of what's satisfactory. Then we've got Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen is an Indian. He's also an economist and a philosopher. And he is also an award winner for a Nobel Peace Award. And his most influential idea is the capability approach. So he then focuses on saying, what are individuals capable of based on the level of freedom and their capabilities to live good life. So it's not, is it just their choice, as Simon would say, or their choices are limited to their access of freedom. So he says, measuring, he said, you can't measure well-being randomly. You have to do it based on income or utility. Well, he said basing well-being on income and utility is inadequate, right? Utility meaning, this is as far as I can use. So, and to say if someone's well-being is based on how much they earn, because there's a lot of people who earn very little, but their well-being seems to be okay. They are happy, they're stable mentally, emotionally. And he emphasized the importance of evaluating people's substantive freedom, which is their access to education, healthcare, social and political participation. So even if you are rich, but you cannot participate in society or in political decisions, you might also feel low, and other essential capabilities. But he also looked, just like Simon, on the importance of education and access to it. And lastly, the third scholar I'm going to look at is the first woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize in economics. Her name is Elinor Ostrom, and Elinor said that behavior within rules involves people making decisions about about matters such as how much of a resource to consume and how much to invest in it. So she looks at how people see these issues, and that they solve the collective action problem in managing the resources to avoid the tragedy of the COM. So she looks at, like, the people, of course, make decisions sometimes as a group or as part of society, and they decide how much you use, like, to spend versus how much you use to save. Basically, that's what her discussion and her analysis was about. Now I'm going to move into what is the significance of participative management. Participative management meaning being part of the management from not just the employer, the management, directors, but also employees. So the first importance or significance is that people's morale is improved. Employees feel valued, they feel that they have a voice, and therefore they get invested in the organization's success. So when someone feels like they belong, that their voice is heard when they speak, then they actually would like to stay longer than 5 years, which has become what is mostly like the average stay for most people in the 21st century within an organization. And then enhanced creativity. So when there are diverse perspectives, it means that people start thinking in different ways, and that common ground where people share ideas also encourages people to see things differently and innovate, and eventually this leads to innovative solutions. And then, of course, the last one is better decisions. So collaborative input actually does result in well-rounded and informed choices. So when people are choosing, for example, if you're in an organization such as a learning institution, you might want to think, okay, so how do I upgrade my skills, for example, or if you even upgrade your skills. If you're working in an organization where everyone is either getting a course, they're moving up, doing a master's, doing a PhD, you end up gravitating towards that. And your decisions, you start considering your decisions instead of just relaxing and taking a back seat into your life. So there are also some barriers to participation, of course. And the first one is lack of trust. So you might find that in some organizations, people don't trust that their voice is really heard or it's used correctly. And this means that the leadership needs to create and sustain a process of openness and transparency. So when they want to decide on activities, they want to change protocols, maybe they want to relook at their policies, they need to do so honestly so that the employees actually see, like, oh, my input in a strategic meeting was put in, so they can start trusting, because usually people don't start at a place of trust when it comes to these issues. And then, of course, there's time constraints. It's important to dedicate specific time for collaborative decision-making. So it shouldn't be random, it should be ad hoc. Otherwise, people get annoyed, like, oh, there's suddenly a strategic meeting, or, oh, can you please give us an idea? There's no time to think about it. But if people know that once every 2 months, we have a session where we sit, we discuss, and we can look over how things are being done, they are almost always well prepared. And the last one is resistance to change. Now, of course, when people participate in, in these communicative processes, there are things that we might need to change, right? Activities, the way people look at things. We're talking about changing perspectives. That's a change. That's not usually easy for people. But once people understand what the benefit is of participating, then that resistance might slowly break down. So it's important to emphasize what the benefits of participative practices are. And then last but not least, of course, the communication gaps can be barriers to participation. And this means that you might have like your system of communication, but if there's a bad feedback loop. So if maybe there's a manager who doesn't take feedback seriously or takes it badly, they get angry, then the feedback might not come honestly, it might not be authentic. So it's important to establish effective feedback loops, and also that information sharing, the platforms, the time, how do people communicate, and how do the gaps in communication, how are they locked so that communication flows easily? Okay, so we're going to look at strategies for encouraging participation. So after the barriers, how then can organizations encourage participation? The first part, which I said last, of course, is employee feedback. And this means regularly soliciting input and ideas from all team members. Always, people should know, our boss likes to ask how things are. Our boss likes to know how we can improve the situation, whether it's changing of seats in an office or lighting, or even just, like how things are done. So if it's a continuous and regular process, then participation will be easier. And then collaborative goal setting, the second one. This one is when you involve employees in establishing shared objectives. Of course, when anyone starts the organization, they know where they want to go. They know what they want to be, like $1 billion Fortune 500, or they've got their objectives. But sometimes an employee can come in, and I'll give the example of if you read the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Phil Knight is the founder of Nike. Actually, when he started Nike, it was called Blue Ribbon, after the award, the blue ribbons he used to win from running awards at college. He involved his employees about wanting to make the best shoe in America, to, not in America, but in the world, to beat Adidas and things like that. And because he involved his employees, there were new ideas that came, and that's going to come in number 3. Everyone felt like, okay, yes, they gave the American pride, and they also felt like they want also to be the best shoe company in the world. Well, when they started, Nike was just doing shoes. That's all they were doing. They were not doing apparel. There was no caps, hoodies, tracksuits. It was just shoes. But look at where they are now. And this is because of empowerment and autonomy. This is to give employees the freedom to make decisions and take action. Now, I'm going to go back to Phil Knight. He used to allow his employees to do wild things back in the day. So, for example, the dedicated store for Nike shoes was not his idea. It was an idea of one of his employees who was working in a different state from him. And when it started, he really thought, like, really, we can't have like a shop that only sells our brand, because, there were these other shops that were selling a myriad of brands. But guess what? It worked. And now we have brand-focused stores around the world. Nike, of course, being the pioneer. Then Adidas followed suit. Puma, North Star. You get stores with just that one brand. And this came from him just allowing his employees to make decisions and take action. So this employee just turned his office into a store. And lo and behold, now Nike has it's got some of the highest numbers of stores, of shoe, like branded stores in America. And then, of course, the last part is recognition and rewards. Acknowledge and celebrate the contributions and achievements of participants. And this is what organizations need to do, whether you give just a small rewards. McDonald's puts manager of the year, of the month, on their board every month. I think if there's some organizations, I think they've seen that here. This is a restaurant that I've been to where you do see like manager of the month or waiter of the month. That is boosting, right? And they are given also just that acknowledgement is enough. Even if you give them a small bonus, that even makes it better. Something like a merit badge that people used to get at school. Now, what is the role of leadership in participative decision-making? So whilst it might seem like, oh, everybody participates and no one takes the lead, that's not true. So in participative decision-making, there is a leader, and that their role is to inspire trust, right? When they inspire trust, they are part of the legwork. This means they also participate. They don't just say, okay, yeah, people, you make decisions and then I'll see. No, they also are part of the work and demonstrate a genuine commitment and appreciation for everybody else's input and participation. They foster collaboration. So by doing that, they facilitate open and authentic dialogue and encourage diverse perspectives. So like anyone else who has another way of thinking is one question that they ask during sessions of brainstorming or discussions. And of course, they empower their employees by delegating authority and supporting employees in owning decisions. So if an employee says, look, this is my idea, this is my thought, they're like, okay, you run with it, we'll support you. What do you need? What resources are needed? Are they within our capacity to give you? Now I'm going to look at the problem-solving sequence, right? Which is the techniques of problem-solving as a collaboration, right? As a collaborative effort. So you've got, I just showed here on the left, the problem-solving sequence. So of course you need to know what is your problem by defining it. Then what possible solutions, and brainstorming solutions means coming up with all manner of solutions. They don't have to make sense when you're doing brainstorming. They have to make sense when you then pick a solution, or you then say, okay, so this is the solution that works, that we've got resources for this, and we can execute this in this time. Then you test the solution, because sometimes a solution might look great, but after you test it, you're like, no, this doesn't quite work. And one of the ways, I think this process of the problem-solving sequence, you'll find that if you use design thinking, which is another form of management that is very popular now, especially with startups, design thinking, where you put the client or the customer first and you have them in mind throughout your process. It really helps then to test the solution and find, do people want this? Do people don't, or people don't like this? And then, of course, you review the results. But back to the collaborative problem-solving techniques, you first start, of course, with the brainstorming. That's where collaboration starts. Well, actually defining the problem. If everyone knows, okay, we've got a problem, let's say I'll use a college, for example, we are not getting students. Why are students not registering here? Then you start thinking, okay, how can we advertise or market our university? What do we want our college to be like? Then generate a wide range of ideas without judgment, like I said, so they don't have to make sense. And then after that, you can mind map. So mind mapping is visual representation to organize and connect related concepts. Like, okay, so problem here, and then this situation, if we go to high schools, we do career fairs, and then what is the consequence? So mind maps broaden those ideas. And then you can also have what is called affinity diagrams. Affinity diagrams, they help identify and group common themes. So, of course, like you could say, what is the economic situation? What is the attitudes of people towards school? Distance from people, all those things. So affinity meaning similar, right? So you're looking at common themes and patterns. And then you use the 5 whys. I think we've done these 5 whys before. You ask why, until you get to the problem, to the root of the problem. So it's probing. Basically, you're asking probing questions. If you ask 5 whys, most of the time, some people get to 7, but if you ask why 5 times, most of the time, you actually get to the root of a problem. And then you can start your solution. You can start working on your solution based on that root instead of just the surface issue that is seen or visible. Now, after the collaborative problem-solving techniques, it's important to also build consensus and understand that conflict is going to happen during these decision-making processes. So it's important, number one, that people have a shared understanding where there's active listening to diverse perspectives. So when we say active listening, we're saying don't listen with half a heart, like, oh gosh, it's Hannah again, and then you switch off. People will stop giving great ideas because they'll realize, oh, okay, when I speak, people don't listen, right? Or the body language just does not give a presence when people are speaking. Or people just feel like, yeah, when you're talking to someone and someone goes blank, that's not active listening, right? So employees require that so that they feel motivated and they feel like a consensus is being built. Compromise and negotiate. So sometimes it's good to find mutually acceptable solutions through open dialogue. And mutually acceptable means you've got a win-win situation for the employer and for the employee. And finally, facilitated discussion. It's usually good to have a neutral party, a third party, to guide the process. Because, of course, when you bring, like, especially employers, when they bring their issues, most of the time they bring the issues. It's not necessarily employees. But sometimes if in an organization, an employee begins to see a problem, they might need to present it. And it's usually best when a third party does it and then brings people to the table so that they can then have that facilitated discussion whereby they then try to forge a way forward. Now, after all said and done, people have discussed, how do people measure the impact of participative practices? The first part is engagement surveys. How you need to, organizations need to assess employee satisfaction and commitment through surveys. And most of the time, the surveys must be somewhat anonymous so that people can be honest and open. And then process improvements, track the implementation of those collaborative initiatives. What did Hannah say last year that is still being done, that was done and only lasted 3 months, that sort of thing? You need, the employees need to check those process improvements. And then, of course, organizational performance. And when we talk of performance, we're looking at the money, evaluating on the key business metrics. Number one, usually, how much money are we getting? How much traffic is occurring? How many inquiries turned into sales, for example? So all those you can then measure and say, oh, okay. Now, after knowing participation, it's always important that within an organization, there's continuous learning, so that people do not become complacent at their skills, because, of course, organizations do not exist in islands or in vacuums. There's competition. And so it's important for them to continue learning and to improve the organization. Now, when this happens, how this happens is through feedback loops. Get either like your employers need to understand that the employees can leave anytime. They have no loyalties, considering if, for example, that maybe they are in demand. So it's important to always review, refine, and participative practices regularly. It's always important also to share knowledge, right? So knowledge sharing encourages, it's done through the encouragement of exchange of ideas and what are best practices through open communication, letting employers speaking their mind, but also letting their employees speak their hearts. And then adaptability. So it's important to be able to respond to any changes, evolving needs and market changes. So right now, people are fighting AI, for example, but some organizations are way beyond that curve. They're already looking at how to refine it, how to make it better for themselves. So it's important to be able to adapt. I guess everybody knows the story of Nokia. Nokia thought that they would be there around forever, but you see what happened with touchscreen technology. They were slow in adapting, and that really cost them many millions of dollars and also a reputation. Now, the key takeaways from this presentation I would like to give is, number one, it's important for organizations to have improved engagement. Participative management boosts employee morale and productivity. So it's important that even us, when we're talking about communication at PhD level, how can that be improved? How can engagement in organizations be improved? And then you also look at better decision-making. What leads to decision-making? And we looked at the scholars and how they were assessing what influences decision-making. Is it the environment, personal choice, all these other aspects? But collaborative inputs within organizations lead to well-rounded and informed choices. And those choices are not just good for the organization, they're good for the individuals in the end, and sometimes even good for the whole industry. And continuous improvement. So regular reviewing of organizations will lead to continued improvement of operations, of activities within an organization. And so that's it from me. If you have any questions or you've got